You hear it all the time from coworkers, from friends, from family members that have bought houses in the past. You're never going to afford a house in this economy.
I'm broke as shit.
And there is definitely some truth to that. Today I want to tackle this and I'll walk you through exactly what you need in order to afford the maximum amount of house that you can, what the average person can afford in this economy. We'll take a look at this beast of a mansion and we'll see exactly what you need to make and what kind of down payment you need to afford a house of this caliber, and of course all the fees that go into all of this. So let's get right into it. So if you're like me, you're probably renting right now and you're thinking you want to start building equity in a home in order to kind of up your net worth, but also just feel like you're working towards something. And I absolutely get that. But first, we should definitely understand what lenders require in order to get a mortgage and what you need to have in place before you should do that. The lenders look at a variety of factors, and some of the most important ones include 2 previous years of pay history in order to judge your stability of income. They also take a look at your tax documents. They'll want employment letters or offer letters if you started a new job during that time. They want to see your employment history. They definitely want to know how much down payment you're willing to put down, and of course need to know your credit score in order to figure out what kind of interest rate you're going to get. And they also take a look at your debt to income ratio, which we'll get into in a moment. Okay, so what do we need in order to have the best chance possible for maximizing the amount of house that we can get for our current income? And of course, this becomes even easier if you have a partner or someone you are going to live with that can boost your annual income. So in this day and age, if you do have a partner, you should definitely be at or around $100,000 per year of household income. And if you're by yourself, maybe around 60 to 70,000. This might not tell the full story either, as we'll take a look in a minute. If you're going to apply, you should definitely try to maximize your credit score, which if you want to learn how to do that, check this video out right here. And you want to make sure that you put down 20% of the home value in order to avoid home insurance, which you're going to have to pay if you put down less than 20%. Finally, they also take a look at your debt to income ratio, which you should really aim to have below 45%. And what is your debt to income ratio, you might be asking? As it sounds, it's the monthly amount of debt payments you have, which includes your mortgage if you already have one, and any loan payments such as lines of credit, student loans, credit card payments that you have, and that divided by your monthly income. So they want this to be below 45%. The lower this is, the better of a chance you'll have to get a much larger mortgage, which of course has its own risks. Now that we know what lenders require and what's optimal to obtain a mortgage, what can the average person afford? And this is something I was so curious about because I live in such an expensive city and the country in general is just very expensive in terms of housing. So I decided to just go in and look at the average person's salary and see how much house they can afford. This is a good one. You better stick around for this. As we discussed in the last video, data from Statistics Canada states that $66,800 is the average person's after-tax income. So assuming a 30% average tax rate, this is about $95,429 per year gross, which is before tax income per person. And on average, I also mentioned we spend about $68,800 per year on average according to 2019 data. This jumps to about $73,500 in urban settings, and if you have children, to about $95,000. Now here's the real kicker. As of June 2023, the average home price in Canada is $709,000 Canadian dollars, and in the US it's very similar, converted to Canadian dollars, $643,000. The Canadian Mortgage and Housing Association, which is kind of like Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae in the United States, they estimate that in order to make sense of housing, it should be less than 30% of your monthly income, and statistics tell us that 33.2% of people spend much more than 30% on their housing. The average in Canada is about 46% of people's income that goes to housing, and when you go to big cities like Vancouver and Toronto, it jumps into the mid to high 70s, which is absolutely absurd. And I'm sure New York City and Los Angeles, among other expensive cities, are very similar. For Toronto, for example, where I live, it's about 72%, which is so high and ridiculous. Luckily, I don't spend nearly that much on my housing. I'm very fortunate in that respect. Okay, so now getting to the actual calculation, which I'll show here on screen. If we assume about 40% spent on housing, which is being a little bit more conservative since it says 30%, but we'll take 40. So this would be $3,181 per month of our average gross income, which would, if you divide that 95,000 that we calculated before by 12, we get $7,952 of gross income every month. And that leaves us with $3,340 to spend on necessities after taxes. And here I assumed a 30% tax rate as well. But since Canadians spend on average more than they earn every month, I assume that monthly expenses equal the amount left over, or that $3,340, so that we have $0 left over at the end of the month, which isn't really a stretch by any means. In terms of the average interest rate that I wanted to use, it's currently between 5.2% to 7%, so I chose 5.5% as my interest rate, assuming we have pretty good credit, which is also not really the case for the average person, but let's just round it up a little bit to make sure you have at least good credit to get the best chance here. Data suggests that the average Canadian only has about $9,972 in savings, so I rounded this up a little bit to $10,000 for our down payment. Even though you shouldn't be spending all of your savings on a down payment, this is just for this example. We'll get into those best practices a little bit later. Doing all of this, plugging into the calculator, you might be thinking, ooh, what kind of juicy mortgage do we get? Or did we get a good house this time? No. $7,545 mortgage is what you'll get. So we could buy a dumpster in an alley, which is pretty nice, right? It's pretty ridiculous. $7,500 for a mortgage with those statistics. What happened to the economy? That doesn't make any sense. How is anyone supposed to qualify for a mortgage? Okay, let's dig a bit deeper. Let's mess around with this a little bit. What if we doubled the average Canadian income? And this would be $190,857. What if we then also double the down payment to be $20,000, and we reduce our expenses from everything that's left over to just half what's left over? Then if we do all of these things, and this is being very optimistic for the average person in the economy, we can afford a house worth just over $400,000, which is still just over 50% of the average home price in Canada. Okay, so now let's see what we need to put down in order to actually afford just the average house in Canada. And in many places, even just one-bedroom condos here in downtown Toronto sometimes go for $1.5 million. If we had that average income with the same interest rate that we used of 5.5%, we would need to put down $440,000 in order to afford the average house. How is anyone going to save that before they're 70 to put into a house? I don't know. Even if we saved half of the expenses that we assumed at $3,350, we divided that by 2 and saved that portion, which already isn't something that the average person is doing because they just can't. The cost of living is too high. This would take you 22 years just to be able to qualify for a mortgage. So I'm 25 right now. I would be 47 years old by the time I could afford a house. That's crazy. And even then, you're still paying it off for the amortization term, which is now pushed to over 30 years. So I'll be well into my 70s before my house is paid off. Keep in mind, this is an average house. In Toronto, that's just a cot. You might get a studio apartment, which is also, you can't raise a family in there, right? Okay, so having taken a look at all this, we should probably figure out what is bad practice here, and in order to not put ourselves in a dangerous situation either. Again, like I mentioned, we don't want to ever spend our entire savings on a home. That's equivalent to putting your entire savings account into a single stock. It's really dangerous. There is some risk involved, and even though you're living in it, so it's kind of like you need to spend it kind of thing, you still won't have any backup for maintenance or any kind of fees that arise, and you just have no savings in general. So if you're using your emergency fund as a down payment, red flag, don't do that. Save up an emergency fund first and then start saving for a home. Even if it does take longer, this is the safer way to do it. We also want to aim to spend less than 40% on housing, which we've determined is pretty difficult, but if you can find somewhere where you can live or even share with a roommate, making it work somehow to get that percentage less than 40, that's really important, especially if you were to lose your job or lose your other streams of income for some reason. It'll just be way less hard on your emergency fund, and you'll be able to stretch it out a lot longer while you look for another job or start your side hustle into a full-time hustle. If you live downtown, it's kind of impossible, so kind of a general rule of thumb here to stay under 40%. It also makes a lot of sense to build in a bit of cushion in your analysis when you're looking at these things, so don't stretch everything to the max. Don't leave room for error, so to speak, because if interest rates go up, your payment can go up quite a lot, which is the case during the pandemic and why there's so many foreclosures and people defaulting on their mortgages because of this higher rate of interest that people have to pay on top of their already sky-high mortgage payments. And I know Graham Stephan, he's very good at the different real estate aspects of finance, and he has this thing that he mentioned, the 30-33 rule. So what is this exactly, and is it feasible? The second answer is no, it's not feasible, of course, because we live in a crazy economy, but let me explain what it means and what we should aim for in the long run. The first 30 is that we should never spend more than 30% of our monthly income on housing, which of course we've already determined is difficult. The second 30 is that we want to have 30% of the home value saved before we buy it, and this is 20% in terms of a down payment and 10% for maintenance and other miscellaneous fees that might arise. And the last one is to never buy a home that's more than 3 times your annual income. And that is difficult for sure. All right, so now what we've all been waiting for, let's look at this insane example here of this house in Toronto that costs $19.8 million. What kind of metrics do we need to afford this in today's economy? In a general setting, we need a down payment of $3.96 million, just light and easy, $3.96 million. We also need an annual income of $4 million. $20,000 per month in this case goes to property taxes, and our monthly payment is a nice cool $120,125. Not too bad, right? I don't know why I would never buy a house like this, I'm not gonna lie. First of all, just the cleaning alone, that would just be insane. You'd have to hire like 5 maids just to clean it, which adds more costs, and you're probably not gonna be there anyway if you're that rich and enjoy it all the time, so I don't understand, but maybe you like it. Let me know. Now this gets even more absurd if we use that 30-33 rule, and so we would need a $4.81 million annual income, $5.94 million saved to cover both the down payment and the 10% of maintenance fees, and we would need an income of $6.6 million per year to satisfy the 3x of your income rule. So the 30-33 rule requires an income of $6.6 million and about $6 million saved. After hearing all that, isn't that the thumbnail just perfect with the dumpster fire? That's a perfect representation of this economy. All right, I know it's kind of depressing, this video, but I hope you learned something, and honestly, I'm really hoping that things correct in the future, and a lot of this is limited supply, which is causing the problem with so many houses needing to be built, especially here in Canada. So let's hope we have a fix for that, or some kind of incentive for people to start building so that we can all get more affordable housing. And if you want to learn more about how interest rates work and how much it adds to your monthly payment and how much you end up paying over a long period of time over the life of your mortgage, check out this video right here. It's a great one. Thank you so much for watching.